Good morning. So we've covered 6 of Jesus's 7 I am statements so far, and each of them has had a kind of corresponding question for us to help consider what we should do with the statements that he makes. How do we respond to who Jesus says that he is? And so we're going to cover the last one this morning, which Jesus says, I am the true vine. And I've found this series helpful personally because I think a lot of the statements that Jesus makes are kind of abstract, and then the application can be equally as maybe confusing. I am the bread of life. It's like, okay, what do I do with that? So talking about these has been helpful for me. This one, I think I enjoy particularly because Jesus makes such a clear application for us when he says this. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches, abide in me. That the whole thing is that we need some kind of connection to Jesus, and that's the thing he's trying to emphasize here. So just to start, I wanted to read John 15, verses 1 through 12. This is Jesus speaking to his disciples. This is in the upper room during the time of Passover with his disciples. They had a meal together, and it was right the hours before Jesus was taken to be crucified. So he says in John 15, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener, or the vine dresser. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My commandment is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my commandment: love each other. So he begins that saying, I am the true vine. What in the world why did he start with, I'm the vine? Where did that come from? Of all the things he could have chosen. Well, the image of a vine in Israel's history was actually something that was fairly common and would have stood out to the disciples. When they heard that, there would have been some Old Testament passages and things the prophets said that they knew about that they probably would have connected with right away and realized some of the context of what Jesus was saying. So in those Old Testament passages and the imagery there, God is the vine dresser, or the gardener, as Jesus says. My Father is the vine dresser. But the vine is Israel. It's God's people. And that's often used, the analogy there, or the imagery, to confront Israel with their unfaithfulness. The picture kind of goes that Israel is this vine that's been planted by God, that's been kept and tended by God. yet they don't live out the conduct that is expected of God's people. They don't bear fruit. So that comes in passages like Isaiah chapter 5. I'm going to read verse 7 for you guys. It says, "For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his delightful plant." So there's that connection of God being the planter and Israel is the vine or the vineyard. He says, "Thus he looked for justice, but behold bloodshed, for righteousness, but behold a cry of distress." So God looked for fruitfulness in his people, but he didn't find it. And the result is most often that God was no longer going to support and tend the vine, that Israel would be left to be overtaken by their enemies. And that's exactly what happened as Israel's taken into exile. So those passages that contain that imagery, Isaiah 5, Jeremiah chapter 2, as well as Psalm 80, all contain that kind of picture. So this wasn't like a one-off thing. It was kind of repetitive through Israel's history that they would have recognized this language and made this connection. And really throughout the whole biblical story, God's purpose to some degree is for his people to be fruitful. In the very beginning in Genesis 1, he tells Adam and Eve to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. He wants them to live out what God says is good and just and right. And then God's purpose and throughout the whole redemptive story of people not bearing fruit and him trying to bring them to a place of fruitfulness is essentially that in Jesus he wants to restore our fruitfulness. That in us, that all of God's goodness and justice would be mirrored and multiplied to the world around us through the work of Jesus. So while in the past the connection to Israel was that former image of the vine, that's where the fruitfulness comes from, of this connection to being God's people, being the people of Israel, Jesus says now that he is the true vine. That it isn't through the connection of Israel, it's not through their heritage, their upbringing, or their involvement in any particular group. And it's not through our heritage or upbringing or involvement of a group or church that is what makes us fruitful. But fruitfulness comes through this personal connectedness to Jesus, as he says, he is the vine and we are the branches. And that goes for each and every one of us. So he tells them to abide in me and I in you, in verse 4. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. He tells them that fruitfulness comes through abiding. And other translations, I think like the one we used, use the word to remain, to abide, or to remain in me, and I in you. And I think both of those words are equally as helpful. It has the sense of permanence, as the kind of the definition of to continue in, to endure in him, to dwell in him. Like this is the place where we stay, where we live. We live our lives here in this connection with Jesus. And it's in the same way that Jesus intends to dwell continually with and in us. That abiding has something to do with our own actions and our choices as he commands us and tells us that we should abide in him, but it also has the other half of Jesus telling us that he intends to dwell in us, live in us in a real and active way, which I think remembering the timing of this makes it even more significant, realizing that this was at a time right before Jesus was about to be taken and be crucified. So he talked to his disciples almost in a way to prepare them. Like he was saying, look, there's going to be a time coming really quick here where it looks like I'm no longer with you, like I'm not abiding with you anymore. But trust me, I'm still with you, and you should stay with me. And I think that has a lot of application for us as well, that there's moments in our lives where Jesus may seem far off or absent, that he's not abiding with us, that he's nowhere to be found. Or for whatever reason, maybe it doesn't seem like Jesus wants anything to do with us. And to remember what he says, that abide in me and I in you. That not only do we need to abide in Jesus to remain in Jesus, but he says that he abides as well with us. It made me think of more recently spending time with a lot of the college students at the campus house and things like that. Would bring my daughter Isla along with us, and she kind of got in the habit anytime we're around. She's a little shy, so we'll go to take her out of the car, and she'll ask, like, Daddy, will you carry me? Like she wants some connection to me or Tara, a connection with something familiar to give her comfort through that. And as long as she keeps us in her sight, she's usually just fine. There's some connectedness that she needs for peace in her present circumstances right now. And I just felt like that was very similar, the way that we need this connection to Jesus in our lives. So there's this incredible statement of Jesus' love for us in verse 9. He says, just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. That Jesus likens his love for us to that of God's love for Jesus. He says, I have loved you. How does he describe that? Just as the Father has loved me. And if there's ever a moment or time when you're wondering about how God feels about us, how he sees us, how Jesus sees us, this just seems profound to me, to think of the way that God sees and loves Jesus, the fondness he has towards him, the pleasure that God has for Jesus, and the comparison that's made to that Jesus sees us and loves us the same way. So he says, abide in my love. Remember that. Stay there. Abiding is used, that word, 10 times in verses 4 through 10. And it seems like the thing that Jesus is really trying to communicate to people here and to us. The main thing, the most important thing that we can do is abide. He says so much so that apart from me, you can do nothing. That fruitfulness is not going to happen without us first abiding, remaining with Jesus. Remembering and living in the life-giving love of Christ for us. That's the beginning, the foundation, the source of any kind of fruitfulness that we could have. And it brings about and helps us understand different processes that happen as we, as we abide with Jesus. Abiding is going to bring about a few things. Pruning seems to be something that he talks about here. In verse 2, as we abide, we're pruned. He says, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. And the first half of this, to me, seemed a lot like some of that old imagery that from the Old Testament, that if there was unfruitfulness, God was just going to chuck it and toss it aside. That language, that every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And I thought it was interesting. I read that the verb there that's translated, he takes away, could also be translated more literally to mean lift up. So every branch that does not bear fruit, he lifts it up, which could refer to a common practice in vineyards at this time of a vine dresser would go through and unfruitful branches. He'd pick them up off the ground and he'd prop them up in some way so they could receive more sunlight and thus become more fruitful. So it's almost like in this verse, as these two things like work together in verse 2. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, if you're in a place of unfruitfulness, I want to make you fruitful. And if you're in a place where you're bearing fruit, I want that to keep going. I want that to grow in you. That Jesus sees potential in us to bear fruit as we abide with him, and he wants to bring that out of us. And I thought that was also kind of further convincing in the idea that the way he describes the branches are in him, in contrast with the way he describes this putting aside of branches that are not abiding in verse 6. So it seems to suggest through all of this that even in an initial state of unfruitfulness, God is looking to bring us to a place where we're fruitful, and that God is glorified in us bearing fruit. That's something that he desires in our lives. And it comes through abiding. obedience seems to come through abiding in Jesus. He says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. And that's in verse 10. If we're obedient to Christ, we're going to be abiding in his love. Just as Jesus, in complete trust and obedience, trusting in the Father's love for him, was obedient even to the point of death. As we remember Christ's love for us, that while we were still sinners, he died for us. As we place our complete trust in this love that he demonstrated, abiding will mean that we're obeying his commandments. And he says that obedience is something that brings about joy in our lives. What are his commandments? This abiding is connected to obeying Jesus, and then obeying Jesus is connected to loving one another. So as if pretty clearly here in verse 12, he says, this is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than one lay down his life for his friends. So the standard here he sets is an incredibly high standard. He says you're to love one another. How? What is that supposed to look like? The same way that I have loved you. This is one of three places in this chunk where Jesus connects love to obeying his commandments. It comes up again, verse 12, verse 17, and then previously in John 13, where he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So it makes this, there's supposed to be a distinctness to followers of Jesus, and that is supposed to be seen through their love for one another. And he says this is a new commandment in the sense that it's a new standard that has not been seen or experienced or accepted before. And that's demonstrated in Jesus' sacrificial love for us. That abiding in Christ's love, remembering his love not only for us, but for people around us, is what brings us to a place of love for one another. Counting each other as those that Jesus laid down his life for. That's going to bring us to a place of valuing one another in the same way, and being prepared to lay ourselves aside for each other and for the good of people around us. So I am the vine, so he says, abide in me. And that's the question. Am I abiding? Has the steadfast love that Christ has for me and his presence with me brought me to a place of pursuing a constant connection with Jesus? Do I pursue fruitfulness outside of that connection? Or is it through that connection that I find myself fruitful? Does my trust in his love and care for me produce obedience in my life and love for others? Jesus wants us to abide, to live in the life-giving love that he has for us, to be fully convinced of that, not only for ourselves, but for the people around us. And that is the beginning, the source of any kind of fruitfulness that we could have in our lives. That's the source where pruning begins, where he begins to shape us further into people who bear his image, where our obedience comes from, and where we begin to develop love for one another through abiding in him. So I'm going to pray, and I'm not sure what comes next. I think Randy will come up for a song and prayers here. God, thank you for God, such a clear passage for us. The idea of abiding in you, remaining with you, realizing your constant presence with us, just makes me think of the comfort that you gave as you ascended into heaven. You said, surely I'm with you always to the end of the age, that there's an abiding that you want to do with us, and you ask us that we would remain and abide with you. God, I pray that would be just our foundation, the main thing that we pursue in our lives, beyond any kind of fruitfulness outside of that. God, that we wouldn't seek other things that make us fruitful, but seek you. And God, to realize the joy that brings, and just all your goodness, and you as the source of life. God, we pray this in your name. Amen.